Señoras y señores, hace mucho tiempo, muchos años, el futuro no era tan cercano a ahora. Tenemos la frase que la diferencia entre science fiction and science is just timing. El futuro nos ofrece dos perspectivas: miedo o esperanza. Miedo implica dolor, costos, sustos. Esperanza, placer. Vamos a hacer algo que nunca habíamos hecho en la Ciudad Ideas. Nosotros consideramos que el conocimiento es transversal, que para resolver problemas profundos en un mundo globalizado, donde compartimos problemas colectivos como el cambio climático, como la pobreza, como la migración, etcétera, necesitamos inteligencias que conjuguen, que se escuchen, que dialoguen. En este segmento, junto con Singularity University y la UNESCO, el Día Mundial de la Filosofía, tenemos un panel espectacular. Vamos a hablar sobre el futuro del periodismo con, para mi gusto, el mejor periodista de México, Sergio Sarmiento. Un aplauso para él. ¡Bravo! El futuro de Dios y de la religión, The Future of God and Religion, con el diablo mismo, no Dios querido, con mi queridísimo amigo Lawrence Krauss, un gran físico teórico que además ahora va a salir en una película, pongan atención, con Werner Herzog. Mark Prost, The Future of Hamburgers, ¿cuál es el futuro de la comida y de las hamburguesas? What will happen with the future of food? Un aplauso para Mark. Chris, que tuve el gusto de conocerlo en Holanda y me dejó muy impactada su plática, va a hablar del futuro de la vejez, el futuro de la medicina. Welcome. Craig, que ya lo conocen, nos va a hablar del futuro de la ciencia, no de la tecnología, de eso ya habló. Ciencia, Dios, religión, medicina, comida, ¿qué falta? El futuro del dinero, con Daniel Vogel, una de las personas más conocedoras de lo que viene en las nuevas tecnologías. Señoras y señores, las reglas del juego ya las conocen. 5 minutos máximo cada uno de ustedes para exponer the good, the bad and the ugly of the future of each of your topics. Lo bueno, lo malo y lo feo. Afterwards, después de eso, tendrán 3 minutos para conversar en qué están de desacuerdo con lo que otra persona haya dicho. Queremos que los campos dialoguen. It's about dialogue. It's about finding the truth. It's about learning to debate and to think critically. Y posteriormente habrán algunas preguntas o una pregunta para que cada uno de ustedes, como ya saben, tengan 1 minuto para concluir. Sin más preámbulos, bienvenidos en la Ciudad de las Ideas al futuro. Sergio Sarmiento.
Gracias. I am Sergio Sarmiento. I'm a philosopher by training. I'm a journalist by profession, 46 years in this profession. And believe me, every one of my colleagues is running scared right now. Everyone's scared about the future. They don't know what the future holds for them. They don't know whether they're going to have a job at the end of the year or within 3 or 4 years. And everyone's running scared for good reason. Just in the US, daily circulation of newspapers has dropped from 60 million a day in the 1970s to 45 million today. And advertising sales have dropped 40% over the past 30 years. And that's just newspapers. But we're beginning to see changes all over the place. Just 20 years ago, Giovanni Sartori, the Italian philosopher and sociologist, told us that a new generation of children were being raised on television and were not learning how to think rationally, but just emotionally. We were raising a generation of idiots. And of course, that doesn't hold very much in good stead for journalism in the future. At the same time, we begin to see that journalistic morals are declining. If what I write is different from what you write, then what you're writing is fake news. And what I'm writing is, of course, the Holy Gospel. That's the kind of journalism we're seeing today, in which we can look at two totally different networks, maybe Fox News and CNN, and find exactly opposite interpretation of the same facts. We forget maybe that everyone is entitled to his opinions, but not everyone is entitled to his own facts. There's a lot of pessimism in my field of work. We don't know whether we're going to be employed. I don't know whether Ricardo Salinas is going to fire me at the end of this speech, because there's no future for journalism. So you can imagine that I'm worried, that I'm concerned. But this is not the first time that I've heard that new media, like the social media, like Twitter and Facebook, are changing the history of mankind and are actually deteriorating the standard of living, the standard of thinking of millions of people. Do you remember the first time I read about a philosopher who was concerned about a new technology that was changing the rules of the game, and that was actually leading young people not to think, but just merely to memorize? It was Socrates. If you read Plato's Symposium, you'll find Socrates' concerns about a new technology that was actually deteriorating the education of children. The new technology was writing. If there was writing, the children, the young students didn't have to learn things. They didn't have to understand things. And they didn't have the possibility of arguing and learning by the dialectical methods. So it was Socrates, the first one who said, you know, we should be careful because this new technology is actually destroying education. So maybe that's the reason why I find the good in the future of journalism. As long as we can tell a story, as long as we can find some people, someone to listen to what we're saying, as long as we can argue and actually defend our positions, maybe there's some future for journalism. Thank you.
Thank you. Lawrence, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And the ugly is religion, of course. But so I'm here under protest because in the past I've lectured here on science, which has content. And now I've got asked to talk about the future of religion. My general rule is also that I don't usually talk about the future of anything unless it's 2 trillion years in the future. Because first, that's easy, and secondly, no one is around afterwards to check if I got it wrong. But let me just begin with the bad news. I don't think religion is going to end. That's the bad news. And I think there's many reasons for that. Partly because clearly, for some reason, religion is ubiquitous throughout human history, and it has fulfilled some evolutionary psychological purpose. And that's the one thing. And then in advanced industrialized societies, religion has become more than that. It's become an institution of power. Those two things work together, I think, to make it very, very difficult to imagine that religion will disappear. The other thing that I think is the most insidious aspect of religion is that religion has claimed a monopoly on morality. And I'll give you an example. In England, as I'll talk about, the number of people who declare themselves as people of faith has been decreasing. And the people who declared themselves as part of the Church of England was about 53% last time. But a friend of mine, Richard Dawkins, his foundation did a survey of those people who declared themselves Christian and said, do you believe in the doctrines? Do you believe in the transubstantiation, the virgin birth? They all said, no, 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 no. And they said, why do you declare yourself as being Christian? The answer was, I like to think of myself as a good person. And most people who declare themselves as people of religion do that because they think in our society that if you declare that you don't accept the myth of God, that you're a bad person. That's the way it is now. And that's going to be very difficult to overcome. But let me now go to the good news. The good news is that in all advanced industrial societies, the number of people who declare themselves as having faith has been decreasing monotonically. And that is ubiquitous everywhere. Even in the United States, where the people of religion are the loudest, the number of people who declare themselves as without faith or atheists is now probably 25%. And there are many more people who are simply afraid of saying that they're atheists, because a recent survey of psychologists that did in the United States shows that the American public, if you look at who they trust, the lowest is atheists. Well, they're next to rapists, which in this case is, anyway, I won't go into it. But so that's, the good news is that's decreasing. The other good news, I think, is that the religion which right now is closest to the primordial religions is Islam. It's the most violent religion right now, but I think that's just a historical accident. If the doctrines of Judaism and Christianity, if you read the scriptures, are just as vile and awful and immoral and awful. They're not a guide for living. No one talked about hell more than Jesus Christ, tormenting people for eternity. Islam, however, is taken more literally, just like Judeo-Christianity was 600 years ago. So I think over time we will find that Islam will ultimately potentially become kinder and gentler once it becomes established in more powerful societies. So that may be a hope, it may be a naive hope. The other thing I thought I would say is religion is going to confront new things because of science. Science has changed the way we think about the world and already addressed many questions that religion claimed to address. And let me list some things that may happen in the near future that will change the way religion has to operate. We may discover extraterrestrial life, intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. That's going to change the game. We may understand the origin of life, how it originated here on Earth. We may understand the origin of consciousness and morality. Those things are going to cause religion to have to adapt, if not disappear. And ultimately, the domain over which religion claims to have the answer to anything will decrease. And it'll decrease because ultimately science will have the answers to pretty well everything that religion claims to have the answers to. So my hope is that even if religion doesn't disappear, the domain of human intellectual activity over which it carries will decrease. And ultimately, my real hope is that we will live in a world where it is perfectly acceptable to say, I'm good without God. I don't know if that's the future, but at least I can hope for that. Thank you very much.
So 5 minutes to talk about the future of food. Interesting. Feeding the world is an immensely complex issue. And there are problems with our food production right now. One of the issues with food production is food is nutritious, it's health-related, it's sometimes scarce, there are distributing issues, but most of all, it's resource-intensive. We need resources that our planet provides for the entire food production. Now, the good news is that our planet actually can sustain food production for 10 billion people in 2050. If we stop wasting a lot of food, if we stop eating a lot of meat or producing meat the way we do it right now, we do have enough resources to feed the planet, and even better than that. The bad news is that we're currently using those resources very, very inefficiently. And the culprit, that's why it was introduced as sort of the future of a hamburger, because the hamburger to me sort of epitomizes the problem with our unsustainable food production. Meat production, livestock meat production is incredibly intensive, incredibly expensive in terms of resources. 70% of all our arable land is used for livestock meat production. And the other part of the bad news is that meat consumption globally is going to increase. The FAO predicts that in 2050, we need 70% more meat production than we have right now. And if you do that math, 70% arable land now, 70% increase, it's not going to happen. So something else needs to change. We can all become vegetarian. We saw this morning that we all like progress. If we all become vegetarian, most of you will not feel that as progress. It will feel as sort of a deterioration of our lifestyle. So what are the other opportunities? We can actually, and we presented that in 2013, we can use other technologies to create meat as we know it through stem cell technology. It's very technological. It's very unromantic. It's very unartisanal. But it's there, and you can multiply tissue to tremendous degrees so that you can reduce the number of cows from 1.5 billion to, let's say, 30,000 on this planet. And that comes with less resources, comes with less methane and CO2 emissions, so it's also much better for the environment. But it is a highly technological solution. And the question is that what we want? I think that's the big question. Do we accept that at some point we have limited resources and we have to adjust our choices, our food choices, to those limited resources, or are we going after these somewhat unromantic technological advances and produce food, or specifically meat, in another way? That's basically the choice. The choice is not to carry on as we have been doing. That's not really the choice. That's not going to happen. So we need to start thinking about this technology. And we need to start thinking about when would this be acceptable? What would make it acceptable for you to eat, let's say, a hamburger that is grown in a lab or in a factory, made by human hands, no longer a cow? What would that mean for sort of our farming? What would that mean for our landscape? There are lots of different questions that will come up with introducing a new technology. And obviously, it will not go abruptly, but it is, in essence, a very disruptive technology. So those are the choices that we have to make. And in my mind, but I'm obviously biased because this is a technology that I've been working on for a long time, in my mind, this is something that we should accept and is actually, if you think about it, relatively easy to accept because it is meat as we know it. And if you think about it, you already probably are eating all sorts of foods that are highly processed, that you don't really know what's in it or how it's being made. And once you develop trust in that food, it's very easy to actually start adopting it and eating it. So I think that's going to be our future. To me, hamburgers as sort of an example, but meat in general is the culprit of our resource-depleting agricultural industry, and coming up with a solution for that is something that we want to have in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here, and I have some very good news to start with. About the future of medicine, well, what I can say is that we are at the brink of a revolution that will transform our health and our bodies and our minds in ways that we have never seen before. And there are 4 important trends that are creating this change in medicine. The first trend is far more accurate medical treatments. Currently in medicine, we still use very blunt tools like medication or surgery. And the problem with, for example, medication is that it's not very specific. These drugs, they work everywhere in your body. They have a lot of side effects. So not good. But now, currently, a lot of new technologies are being developed, and they are far more accurate, precise, cheap, and fast. And this is not just a pie in the sky. No, we are seeing concrete results already. We are seeing patients today who are getting cured of diseases which were 100% fatal a few years ago. We see young children, babies with aggressive blood cancers, we are still alive today because of these new treatments. We see, for example, patients with skin cancer that has been metastasized, spread across the whole body. A few years ago, that was a death penalty in medicine. But now some patients can completely cure of this cancer. So that's something very remarkable. And what kind of new technologies will it be? Well, some examples, CRISPR-Cas9. We heard a little bit before about this new technology. So it's used to rewrite genes very easily and accurate and very much faster than a few years ago, in fact. Another technology is optogenetics, where you use light to switch cells on or off. Scientists use this technology to reprogram brains. For example, in mice, they could delete memories and so on. Another therapy is immunotherapy, where you use the immune system to attack cancer, which is much more accurate than chemotherapy. Then a second trend in medicine will be the use of, or will be the advent of better artificial intelligence, more data availability, and faster processing computer processing power. And currently, artificial intelligence is already analyzing medical files and medical databases to diagnose patients, to propose the best treatment, to even predict your risk of dying or your risk of suicide. Artificial intelligence is already used, for example, to analyze medical scans or to investigate biopsies or to develop new medications. So that's very interesting. Another trend in medicine will be tackling aging. So a lot of people think aging is something natural, but that we have to let run its course. But we are now seeing, in fact, that a lot of scientists everywhere in the world are trying to, not just to slow down aging, but to actually reverse aging. Which means you have somebody who's 80 years old and you make him 50 years or 30 years old. And what's most interesting is it doesn't seem that difficult to do this. We have seen recent studies in which they took mice, old mice, with a gray fur, and they were frail and not very active, and they reversed aging in these mice. So the gray fur became black and shiny again. These mice became very active. So it shows, in fact, that aging is an amenable process, a plastic process. And then another trend is, of course, upgrading humans. So in the past, medicine was mainly about curing the sick. In the future, medicine will be also about upgrading the healthy. So it will become very enticing to do so because it will become so easy to do so. With these new gene editing methods like CRISPR, for example, it's very easy to write genes. So why shouldn't we do it? It takes only one gene you have to change to become immune to HIV, for example. Another gene you can change and it can reduce your risk of Alzheimer's disease 9-fold in some patients. So why shouldn't we do it? And we will do it. Now, the bad of all this is, of course, these will be very powerful tools, and they have to be used responsibly, and they will also create new threats, new kinds of threats, like bioterrorism, like bioterrorists creating bacteria that become resistant to all known antibiotics. Another threat could be a bioterrorist creating a virus that can cause cancer. Then we see also the advent of biological inequality. Because currently the rich people, they still die and age like anyone else, and they have the same bodies and minds. But in the future, these new biotechnologies will enable specific people, for example, to have much healthier and younger bodies and smarter minds. So that's also something we have to think about and prepare for, that everyone can profit from these new technologies.
Un aplauso, por favor.
Thank you.
So we have benefited by many inventions in the past, some of them as profound as the control of fire and cooking, to the invention of steel, to the invention of printing, to the invention of antibiotics. Many of us today are alive because of antibiotics. But the greatest invention of all has been the invention of the scientific method. And much of the progress that we have experienced today, that you saw in this morning's talk, came because of the invention of the scientific method. It's the magical genie that can invent new inventions. So most of the inventions we have today have come through in some process because of the scientific method. The scientific method itself is not a single invention. It's a series of inventions, an evolution of inventions. The first part of it was the discovery and the invention of the idea of a controlled experiment. You'd have a hypothesis and you'd do an experiment and you would modify your hypothesis based on the results. And then an additional evolution of that was this idea of a controlled experiment where you would have a control, something you didn't change, in order to compare it to the experiment. And then there was many other evolutions of that process. But most remarkably is that a lot of the ideas or techniques that we associate with the scientific method today were invented very, very recently. So recently we came up with the idea, collectively, of a random sample. So that if you're doing something with lots of samples, you want to look at them in a random way so you're not biased. Then later on, we came up with an idea of doing a health experiment with a placebo so that the patient would not be aware of what they were taking, so they would not be biased. And then later on, we came up with the idea of the double-blind experiment so that not only did the patient not know what was involved, but even the experimenter themselves didn't know. Both sides were blind. So these are all additional evolutions in the scientific method. And because of this evolution, we now enjoy all the prosperity that we have today. But I suggest that the scientific method itself will change more in the next 50 years than it has in the last 50 years, which has been a lot. And so we can kind of imagine what would the scientific method look like in the next 50 years? What kind of future evolutions might we expect? Well, there are many of them. One of the most profound ones would be the publication and dissemination of negative results. So today, generally, when someone does an experiment and it fails to produce new results that they think are important, those aren't shared. But that's valuable information that, if shared in a proper way, could become very, very powerful. From not repeating things that have already been done, but the negative results themselves are actually information that can be useful. And there are attempts to begin to do that, but it's not very widespread. And there are problems in doing that, but they can be overcome. So the dissemination of negative results is one way in which the future of the scientific method could evolve. There are other ways they could also evolve. It could, we could be using more and more simulations, computer simulations, to do things. And we're also going to be using AI to do proofs of things, to go through the processes and all the steps and help us decide whether something has really been proved. The downside to that is we may not understand that proof. We may have to accept some kind of logical conclusion that we don't even understand. And there are also another important way that the scientific method will change is through the use of new tools. Science progresses by the invention of new tools, and the kind of new tools that we're inventing right now actually, ironically, are things like artificial intelligence, virtual reality, synthetic life. It's by trying to make intelligence, it's by trying to make life, by trying to make a virtual reality that we're actually going to, they are actually tools to help us understand intelligence, life, and reality. So those new tools become the way in which the future of scientific method will evolve in the future of science. Thank you.
About 7 years ago, a friend of mine told me there was this new form of digital currency that was controlled by no one and that it was completely digital. I asked if a central bank issued it. He said no. And when I first looked at it, this thing called Bitcoin, I thought it was completely stupid and crazy. 7 years later, I stand here in front of you. I helped run one of the biggest digital currency exchanges in Mexico. One of the things that we do is trade Bitcoin. And in the next 4 minutes and a half, I will try to convince you why I believe the future of money is something that is not minted by a central government. It is not controlled by anyone. It's completely decentralized, and it's digital. I think it's very difficult to do that without first looking at our current money. So this thing is a bill for 50 pesos, and it says 50 pesos in here. If I go to the central bank today and I say, hi, Mr. Carstens, can I please have 50 pesos? Nothing will be given back to me. This is what students of money call fiduciary money, which means that the value of this is 50 pesos because the central bank says it's 50 pesos, and we choose to believe that it's 50 pesos. That's actually something really interesting. It's been decades since government-issued money has been backed by anything. If you think about, for example, a country like Venezuela, where a group of people have been printing money with no end, and it's a country that has seen hyperinflation for the last few years, and you ask yourself, who do I trust my money with? I have this bill that says 50 pesos, and today it buys something from me, but what guarantees and assurances do I have that the people who do that and who decide the monetary policy of my 50 pesos will do something that benefit me in the future. I believe the future is not governed by a set of individuals who I have no connection to, but by mathematics, science, and technology. And that is what Bitcoin is. If I think about a migrant who is in the United States and wants to send money back to his wife and his kids here in Puebla, and I think about how does he achieve that, and how much money does he pay to achieve that? And is it right that a hardworking Mexican who is currently living in the United States has to pay 10% in order to do something as basic as moving value from one country to another? Is that right? Digital currencies can achieve that almost at zero cost today. If you think about, for example, the money that you owe, the money that you own right now, where does that money sit? Does that sit perhaps at a bank? What happens when a bank decides to suddenly use that money in awful ways, like it happened in 2008 with the financial crisis? Wouldn't it be amazing if I could be my own bank, if I could be the custodian of my own money? What happens to the 80% or the billions of people in the world who have no access to financial services? Wouldn't it be amazing if there's more people that have cell phones and mobile line subscriptions than running water? Wouldn't it be great if we could start providing people with financial services using cell phones, technology, telecommunications, cryptography, and digital currencies? I believe that's the future of money. It's something very different than what we're used to. We're used to thinking of these bills printed by a central entity that we choose to believe in, that we choose to trust in. But is that right? Technology and communications have disrupted pretty much every industry here. Every single of these individuals that I've talked, those industries have all been deeply affected by technology and communications. Today, we're more connected than any other time in the time of history, in the time of humanity. And wouldn't it be strange if money wasn't also disrupted by telecommunications, by cellular telephony, by cryptography? My belief is that the future of money is a decentralized digital currency, not controlled by anyone, ruled by mathematics, by science, and technology, and giving the people the power and the control of money where it belongs to, where the people, and not with certain institutions. Thank you.
Bravo. Okay, I don't know if any of you would like to, at most, take 3 minutes of your time in relation to any of the other topics that you heard about. And please, Lawrence.
When you were talking about the future of medicine, which I found very fascinating, there's one area where I think it's interesting. I've been thinking a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning lately. And neural networks are very effective at finding solutions. But if you're operating the neural network, you have no idea how they found the solution. That works in a lot. If you're playing Go, that's fine. The interesting question I have is, when you're a patient, would you be willing to take a medication or a process with a machine having diagnosed that this works without any biochemical understanding or any really fundamental understanding of why it works? Will that be something that you think people will be willing to do? A black box which is effective, but for reasons that we don't understand. I was wondering if you might want, or well, both of you. But.
Okay, thank you. That's a very interesting question. And I think a lot of people in the future, when they go to a doctor, they will want to have a second opinion, and it will be of an artificial intelligence. Because these artificial intelligence algorithms, they will be much better than medical doctors. Because we can't follow all the literature that's coming out, all the millions of articles. We can't remember all the diseases that are running in your family. We get tired, irritated, because we have been working and seeing patients for hours. So these artificial intelligence programs, they will be much, much better than medical doctors to diagnose diagnose people, and then people won't care whether it's a black box or not, because they will see the results. Already now, some computers, they can diagnose diseases much better than medical doctors.
But do you think they'll have to lie? I mean, they'll have to pretend like doctors. I mean, doctors pretend they know what they're doing too.
Yeah,
and so they have to tell the patient something. Take this because. But you know, I agree with you. There's no doubt they'll be better than doctors. They'll be better than lawyers, and they'll probably be better than physicists too. But the question is, well, in order to get, part of being a doctor is not just diagnosing, but somehow convincing the patient to do what you want them to do.
Indeed. Very, very quickly. Well, that's an interesting question, and there is a lot of debate about that. Patients, they like interaction with their doctor, but there are also some scientists who are saying, well, these artificial intelligences, they will be able to analyze your voice and your eye movements, and they can read your emotions probably even better than a medical doctor. Because sometimes medical doctors, they can't read the emotions of patients very well. And so these artificial intelligence, they will adjust their tone of voice when they have to give a grave diagnosis. They can compare all the diagnoses that patients heard when they received bad news, and really choose the best way according to your character, because they scan Facebook, so they know what personality you have. They will adjust this bad news conversation with a very soothing voice that perhaps resembles the voice of your mother, with a bit of your grandfather in it. So I think perhaps in the future, patients will want to hear a bad news diagnosis of their artificial intelligence. Who knows?
Please.
So first of all, for thousands of years, people have taken medicines without having any evidence or knowledge about how they work. So people are perfectly acceptable to do that. And secondly, with the artificial intelligence, yes, maybe the doctor, people might be reluctant to surrender a doctor's care to an AI, but the value of an artificial intelligence doctor is for the billions of people who have no doctor at all. And that's much better. So even an AI doctor that is not very emotional is still better than no doctor.
I don't want to push this too much. I'll do one more question. But so patients might accept it. What about doctors? Will doctors be willing to accept diagnoses that they don't understand?
Well, that will be the problem of the future. A lot of people will lose their jobs, and a lot of doctors also. And the first doctors that will lose their jobs are the radiographs, the people who read the scans, so the radiologists. But I think a lot of doctors are a bit pessimistic about these new things that are coming in their direction, but they tend to sometimes to underestimate the power of these artificial intelligence programs. But I think we will go to a future where the medical doctor works with the artificial intelligence to come to the best proper treatment for patients.
I love it because I was raised in a family that your mother wants that you become a doctor.
Mine too.
Now my mother will be the doctor. That's great. Fantastic. Un aplauso, por favor.
I think though, one of the most fascinating things that's happened in artificial intelligence in the last few years is they built this machine that played Go, this very ancient Chinese game. And it played and played and played against itself many, many times, and then it played against the world champion. Or it played a bunch of people, but then eventually played against the world champion. And in one of those games, the machine made a move, and nobody understood the move.
Yes.
And everyone said the machine must have made a mistake. And then it was clear that no, the machine just learned to play Go very differently because it played against itself so many times. And so I think that one of the scary things about artificial intelligence is that these machines are learning a way to think that we as humans don't understand, you know? And when you mix that with medicine, what happens, right? Like what happens if a machine tells you to do something that a doctor fundamentally believes or just doesn't understand, right? What happens then? And it might be that these things just have learned a way to detect something that we just don't know or don't know how to understand it. And it might be right, you know? But how difficult, imagine if you have the life of a human being and you got to choose to do A or B and the machine says A and everyone thinks that the machine is wrong. How do you make those decisions?
So I will make a prediction. I will make a prediction that in 10 years from now, that the world's best Go player will not be an AI. It will not be a human. It will be a team of an AI and human, because that's what happened in chess. When Kasparov lost to Deep Blue, he was the world's best chess champion. He lost to Deep Blue. He made a new chess league where humans could play with the AI. And right now, today, the best chess player on the planet is not an AI. It's not a human. It's the team of AI and human. And I would suggest that the best medical diagnostician in the future is not going to be an AI and not going to be a human doctor. It will be the team of AI and doctors.
Well, Sergio, Mark and then Sergio, please.
Well, go ahead.
Sergio, please.
Well, this is actually for Mark. I mean, we've been told so many times that eating a hamburger is bad for the environment, is bad for everyone, that we sometimes forget how all of these predictions have turned wrong. In the past, Malthus told us that we're going to be all starving and fighting each other for food in the late 19th century. It didn't happen. The Club of Rome told us that we would run out of food by the end of the 1900s. It didn't happen. In the 1970s oil crisis, they told us we're going to run out of oil. They never actually understood that if the price of oil increased, someone would actually come up with a better technology to take oil out of the land. Aren't we underestimating the power of science and the power of the human mind?
No, that's why I think that the problem of the hamburger will not occur because of our technology. Right?
It's a new hamburger.
True, though, I mean, I'm a big fan of technology, but isn't it true that we could feed everyone in the world now already? I mean, if we wanted to?
Yeah, but
we have the most
problem
food in
is
history. I mean,
the
we've
problem
never
is
had so
we're
much
going
food.
to 10 billion people from 7 right now, and the demand for meat is going to increase. So in India and China, meat consumption is increasing rapidly, and it's going to happen in Africa too. And you have to understand that meat is a very, very expensive part of our diet. Yeah. So that's what we're not able to sustain. That's even if there's no technology, that's not necessarily a problem. But then we all have to reduce our meat consumption, and it becomes more expensive. That's the other option, I guess.
Because of the time, I will ask you very quickly a small question. You have 1 minute to answer it if you wish. Sergio, at the end, it's absolutely the opposite with doctors. You don't think that every person will be actually a journalist, and that the biggest concern will be how to search? You go to a library, and I could imagine a person telling me, okay, you could find whatever you want about biology or biochemics or whatever, but the problem is how to search, how to really believe what you're reading. But today, most of the people are famous for 15 seconds, and probably what will happen with journalism is that everybody will think that they have an opinion. My dear friend, one thing is what will happen with religion, and the other one is what will happen with God and believing in God. You mentioned at the beginning that religion will survive for two reasons. One is because it has been a way to survive, evolution. Mm-hmm. The other one, it has to do with power, etc. So at the end, you're acknowledging and you're recognizing that to be part of a religion has a good part, which is to survive and to evolve. A question for you. Why do you use hamburgers and not tacos as an example? No, yes, no. The concern is, at the end, we will adapt to new flavors. We will adapt to new ways to eating. So it's not like, I don't see a dilemma. I think that in the future, your proposal, at the end, what will happen is not that you will choose if you want to try what you have been always eating, or if you will be aware that you're eating another thing with the same flavor, but much more better for your body. So I really didn't get the dilemma. That's just for you, my question is pretty easy. If I go with a doctor, which is a robot, and make a diagnosis, and then you tell me that I could go to another robot to hear a second opinion, and if that second robot gives me a different opinion, what the hell with the robots? You know what I mean? Why a second opinion with a robot if they already know the diagnosis? The first one is so good. I mean, I would be very surprised to have a second one. About science, social science. Not everything has to do with math and with... I love your point. I really believe and share with you that the best invention of humanity is the scientific method, 100%. However, there is another part and another need that has to do with politics, with trade, with emotions, with love, and also what will happen there in terms of science. I would like to listen a little bit about the other side of science, but in terms of humanities, and about money. The question I have for you is, what will happen in Mexico and in some countries with the regulation? But I'm not talking about the far future. In the short run, and everybody's talking about the ugly part, and I don't understand it. I don't know if you could elaborate a little bit about lavado de dinero and problems of transparency and things like that. So please, just 1 minute. If you don't mind, we could start with you, Sergio.
Okay. Everyone's already a journalist. Everyone who tweets an idea, everyone who has a posting on a Facebook is already a journalist. In fact, journalism is a little bit like education. It was a minority endeavor just 200 years ago. Right now, everyone's educated. Now, the big question is quality. Quality of education. Of course, everyone might be educated, but only a few are receiving a good quality education. Those are the ones that are actually going to be able to build a better future. It's the same thing with journalism. We have 1 billion journalists all over the world. The big question is, how many of those journalists check their facts, have reasonable opinions, have some kind of support for what they're claiming, for what their positions are? That's the difference even right now. There are 1 billion journalists in the world, but only a few of them are being heard. That's the future.
Okay. So the point is a good one. I said religion has an evolutionary basis, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing. Xenophobia has an evolutionary basis. We in a society have tried, in intelligent societies, to try to overcome that. I think we need to ask, what things does religion provide, and how could we provide it in more effective, generous, and real ways? And we can ask about community that it might provide solace, and I think we can provide those things. You know, meeting every Sunday. A lot of people say, well, it's great to meet every Sunday. I think people meet every Sunday because the stories are so stupid. They have to be reminded every Sunday of what they are. We don't have quantum mechanics classes every Sunday. You just teach it once. But I think the real point is that we can get the awe and wonder and satisfaction of the world without myth and superstition. The spirituality of science is so much better than the spirituality of religion for one reason. It's real. Okay.
Well, it's not religion, it's superstition.
Yeah. Why not create entirely different products if you have the technology? And of course, that's what we are thinking about. This technology allows you to think of new products that are sort of out of the realm of what we have today. There are not that many examples, by the way, of old foods completely vanishing and disappearing. So we are building on a great tradition of creating new foods, creating new components of foods, and that will continue. And we are not eating away somewhere at the bottom where things are disappearing. So it's continuously evolving, and the technology actually probably accelerates that evolution. So yes, I think that's what we might call progress, that we get more and more decadent in the choices that we have in our food.
Yes.
Well, I think we are humans and we are not perfect. Our brains are far from perfect, and even our brains are not made to conduct medicine or play piano, by that way. So the medicine and health is so complex, and we need an entity that can really track all these things happening in your body, all your family history, your other problems you earlier encountered in your medical history. So it's impossible to remember that as a human and to integrate that. And we also need, as a medical doctor, look into your genome, but not only into your genome, but also your microbiome, your proteome, your transcriptome. And it's impossible for a human doctor to remember all this. So you need a machine that can really follow up all this, integrate this knowledge, and come with a proper diagnosis. And it's just impossible for humans, and medicine will be much better if we can work together with intelligences who can do that.
Gracias. Thank you, Bas.
So I think you're right that at times science seems very cold and rational, and what we as humans crave is emotion and meaning in our lives. And at times it's hard to see what the meaning in our lives are if we're in a scientific framework. But in fact, I think we're beginning to get a scientific story that is bigger than ourselves and that we can identify with. And that story begins at the Big Bang, and it runs through the self-organizing dynamics of matter and planets and stars and galaxies, and runs through self-organizing life and mind, and now is in technology as it's self-organized. And we are part of that, and as we make new things, as we make new discoveries, we are actually increasing the options and possibilities for all humans, including ourselves and those who are come, to fully express our full talents and share our genius. And that is a story that we should be telling in scientific terms, and it's a story that can give meaning to our lives, so it's not independent of religion.
Gracias. Vas.
Yeah.
I think technology has always had this very interesting link to criminals, right? Like criminals have figured out ways to use technology over and over again. So not because a criminal uses an airplane or uses the internet to communicate with their criminal organization do you want to bar the entire world from using technological advances. And I think that's, that's not to say that with digital currencies, you can't build things in a very professional and in thinking about how do you prevent things like money laundering. And so I can't talk for many other countries, but in Mexico, in the next few weeks, the Senate will be discussing the Fintech Law. One of the things that it touches upon is how do you do things like anti-money laundering for these types of technologies. And so these things will become regulated, and the important thing is that they become regulated in a way that don't prevent us from achieving the full potential of these things, so that, unbanked people can use it, remitters can use it, and we can all benefit from it.
Señoras y señores, un aplauso para este gran panel. Periodismo, teísmo, religión, alimentación, medicina, ciencia, dinero. Solo en la Ciudad, Ideas, 10º aniversario. Muchas gracias. Por favor, quédense. Ahora viene el Pitch Palace con David Rowan. Thank you very much.